So, hello people. Today, what we are going to do, I have started a new sort of series. You can understand like it. And in this particular series, I will be reading this book, Jane Austen's Persuasion. And this particular book, I am reading it for my course that I have joined on an NPTEL portal. More about that later on, but about this particular setup, as you can see, it's a application that is named Atheres Voice Reader. It's a free application available on Play Store, and if you want, you can use it and read it alongside with me. In this particular application, what you need to do is just simply find any PDF of any book that you want to read, and this particular application will read to you. My preference is with using for the voice part. I usually prefer the Google system. Otherwise, if you have a better one, then you can use it for yourself, like if you want different, there are various voices available, as you can see, um, and among these voices you can select any of them. My particular system is that I use Google text to speech, and in that I am using an Indian voice, an Indian voice number one, that works best for me. And the other settings are that I basically want to keep the rate at 1.10 and the pitch to 1.10 as well. In on the mobile, I increase the rate because I have been doing it from a very long time. So for that I increase it, but not here. Second thing is that about this particular book, I have already completed the week one chapters. Like for week one, I had to read uh, 6 chapters that have already been completed. Here onwards, I'll be reading from chapter 7, and hopefully, I will read 2 or 3 chapters in this stream. And as we progress on, we will be reading more chapters as we move forward. Second one thing that I wanted to share is the new layout. As you can see, here's the information about mm, right here. You can see the information, the total number of channel views that I have, and right here, I think so. Yeah, right here you can see my Instagram and my Twitter ID, and just after that you can see the member goal. Currently I have 518 subscribers, and I'm hoping to get 550. This is my current goal, and as we will reach it, hopefully we will change it as we progress on. And beside that, on the YouTube logo, you can see the current watching. I am currently watching my own stream, so it is telling us the one. So yeah, that is all. And I think that yes, that is it, and we should start reading. Before it, I do want to add one some music and all, because that is always good. um, yes. Just want to keep it very low. I want to focus on the reading first. So, yes. Let's talk a little bit more about the book that we are currently reading. This particular book is the name of this book is Persuasion, and that is written by Jane Austen. It's one of the many books that one has to read if you have to understand the kind of writings and the kind of things and about the society. If you want to learn about the society of 19th century, the course that I have joined is also the same. Like using this course, my objective is to learn more about specifically the society, but I do want to have a better understanding of how this whole scenario of reading and how to get more out of it, and how to go from a normal reader to a better reader, like all along. So that I'll be trying to do as we move on. I hope there is no issues regarding the quality, but I think that there is some sort of buffering is there. So yes, hopefully it will go away as we move on. And let for the sake of that, I'll be I think that yeah, let's continue it, read it for about half an hour, and hopefully, if the stream quality is not very great in this particular stream, tomorrow I will change the settings and all, and hopefully we will be getting back to the normal quality that we used to have on the stream. And yes, I can still see that some buffering is there, but hopefully as we progress on there will be less of it. Yeah, so with everything out of the way, let's start reading. Also, I'll be adding some vocabulary options as we move on. Not today, but hopefully in the tomorrow's stream we will also add certain places where there the different words that we see, we will be able to know the meaning of all those. For example, if there
To
is
be
a
it
word
Kelling and to
that
be it Kelling and Mr. Musgrove.
I cannot understand, for example, the meaning of called, then I can just simply click here, and it will tell me the meaning of the word called, that is named, known as, or called. So and that is good for vocabulary purposes as well, and hopefully it is going to help us in improving our vocabulary also. This particular story is about a family living in Kalinchal. Kalinchal is the name of the place where these people are living, and due to the financial conditions and all, they have to move. And in the particular course also, the professor is of course she is also explaining as we move on. So the first week content is already over, so now I will be moving on to like I'll be reading the next 6 chapters, so that I will be ready to prepare or attend the lectures that will be available, like they are already available, or onwards, tomorrow onwards, or day after that they will be available. So everything apart, let's start reading from chapter number 7. I'm starting, and hopefully this is not going to affect anymore to our reading schedule. Okay, you can follow along with that.
To be it Kelling and Mr. Musgrove had called on him and come back warm in his praise, and he was engaged with the Crofts to dine at Uppercross by the end of another week. It had been a great disappointment to Mr. Musgrove to find that no earlier day could be fixed, so impatient was he to show his gratitude by seeing Captain Wentworth under his own roof, and welcoming him to all that was strongest and best in his cellars. But a week must pass, only a week, in Anne's reckoning, and then, she supposed, they must meet, and soon she began to wish that she could feel secure even for a week. Captain Wentworth made a very early return to Mr. Musgrove's civility, and she was all but calling there in the same half hour. She and Mary were actually setting forward for the great house, where, as she afterwards learned, they must TANTS inevitably have found him, when they were stopped by the eldest boy's being at that moment brought home in consequence of a bad fall. The child's situation put the visit entirely aside, but she could not hear of her escape with indifference, even in the midst of the serious anxiety which they afterwards felt on his account. His collarbone was found to be dislocated, and such injury received in the back as roused the most alarming ideas. It was an afternoon of distress, and Annie had everything to do at once: the apothecary to send for, the father to have pursued and informed, the mother to support and keep from hysterics, the servants to control, the youngest child to banish, and the poor suffering one to attend and soothe, besides sending, as soon as she recollected it, proper notice to the other house, which brought her an accession rather of frightened, inquiring companions than of very useful assistants. Her
Just a minute, guys. I'll have to uh, edit the chat box because I think there is some issues. Yes, I think so. It's fine for now. I know it's a little bit small. I think hopefully I can make it a bit big. That is enough, I think so. Let's start.
Her brother's return was the first comfort; he could take best care of his wife, and the second blessing was the arrival of the apothecary. Till he came and had examined the child, their apprehensions were the worse for being vague. They suspected great injury, but knew not where. But now the collar bone was soon replaced, and though Mr. Robinson felt, and rubbed, and looked grave, and spoke low words both to the father and the aunt, still they were all to hope the best, and to be able to part and eat their dinner in tolerable ease of mind. And then it was, just before they parted, that the two young aunts were able so far to digress from their nephew's state as to give the information of Captain Wentworth's visit, staying 5 minutes behind their father and mother, to endeavor to express how perfectly delighted they were with him, how much handsomer, how infinitely more agreeable they thought him than any individual among their male acquaintance, who had been at all a favorite before. How glad they had been to hear Papa invite him to stay dinner, how sorry when he said it was quite out of his power, and how glad again when he had promised in reply to Papa and Mamma's father pressing invitations to come and dine with them on the morrow, actually on the morrow, and he had promised it in so pleasant a manner, as if he felt all the motive of their attention just as he ought. And in short, he had looked and said everything with such exquisite grace, that they could assure them all, their heads were both turned by him, And off they ran, quite as full of glee as of love, and apparently more full of Captain Wentworth than of little Charles. The same story and the same raptures were repeated when the two girls came with their father, through the gloom of the evening, to make inquiries, and Mr. Musgrove, no longer under the first uneasiness about his heir, could add his confirmation and praise, and hoped there would be now no occasion for putting Captain Wentworth off, and only be sorry to think that the cottage party, probably, would not like to leave the little boy, to give him the meeting. Oh no, as to leaving Tants. Little boy, both father and mother were in much too strong and recent alarm to bear the thought, and Annie, in the joy of the escape, could not help adding her warm protestations to theirs. Charles Musgrove, indeed, afterwards, showed more of inclination. The child was going on so well, and he wished so much to be introduced to Captain Wentworth, that, perhaps, he might join them in the evening. He would not dine from home, but he might walk in for half an hour. But in this he was eagerly opposed by his wife, with, "Oh, no, indeed, Charles, first cannot bear to have you go away. Only think if anything should happen." The child had a good night, and was going on well the next day. It must be a work of time to ascertain that no injury had been done to the spine, but Mr. Robinson found nothing to increase alarm, and Charles Musgrove began, consequently, to feel no necessity for longer confinement. The child was to be kept in bed and amused as quietly as possible, but what was there for a father to do? This was quite a female case, and it would be highly absurd in him, who could be of no use at home, to shut himself up. His father very much wished him to meet Captain Wentworth, and there being no sufficient reason against it, he ought to go, and it ended in his making a bold, public declaration, when he came in from shooting, of his meaning to dress directly, and dine at the other house. "Nothing can be going on better than the child," said he, "so I told my father, just now, that I would come, and he thought me quite right. Your sister being with you, my love, I have no scruple at all. You
Hello,
would not
Anushka,
like to leave
welcome.
him yourself, but you see I can be of
Yes,
no use.
trying to
Annie will send for me."
learn, and yes, it's a book named Persuasion by Jane Austen. I was reading it. I thought of doing up the. I hope the quality is not very bad, but hopefully tomorrow I'll fix it. I'll lower the bitrate and all. If the quality if is the quality good or not, can you please let me know if you are still there? Okay, thank you.
Annie will send for me if anything is the matter. Husbands and wives generally understand when opposition will be vain. Mary knew, from Charles's manner of speaking, that he was quite determined on going, and that it would be of no use to tease him. She said nothing, therefore, till he was out of the room, but as soon as there was only Annie to hear. "So you and I are to be left to shift by ourselves, with this poor sick child, and not a creature coming near us all the evening."
Uh, as you said, amazing. So I hope the quality, the stream is not buffering and all, because it showed me that there was some issues that people experiencing some sort of buffer and all. But if it's working well, then that's fine. And thank you for letting me know. And yes,
"So you and I are to be left to shift by ourselves, with this poor sick child, and not a creature coming near us all the evening. I knew how it would be. This is always my luck. If there is anything disagreeable going on, men are always sure to get out of it. And Charles is as bad as any of them. Very unfeeling. I must say it is very unfeeling of him to be running away from his poor little boy. Talks of his being going on so well. How hence? I did not think Charles would have been so unfeeling. So here he is to go away and enjoy himself, and because I am the poor mother, I am not to be allowed to stir. And yet, I am sure I am more unfit than anybody else to be about the child. My being the mother is the very reason why my feelings should not be tried. I am not at all equal to it. You saw how hysterical I was yesterday. Tants. But that was only the effect of the suddenness of your alarm, of the shock. You will not be hysterical again. I dare say we shall have nothing to distress us. I perfectly understand Mr. Robinson's directions, and have no fears, and indeed, Mary, I cannot wonder at your husband. Nursing does not belong to a man, it is not his province. A sick child is always the mother's property, her own feelings generally make it so. I hope I am as fond of my child as any mother, but I do not know that I am of any more use in the sick room than Charles, for first cannot be always scolding and teasing the poor child when it is ill. And you saw, this morning, that if I told him to keep quiet, he was sure to begin kicking about. I have not nerves for this sort of thing. But could you be comfortable yourself to be spending the whole evening away from the poor boy? Yes, you see his papa can, and why should not I? Jemima is so careful, and she could send us word every hour how he was. I really think Charles might as well have told his father we would all come. I am not more alarmed about little Charles now than he is. I was dreadfully alarmed yesterday, but the case is very different today. Well, if you do not think it too late to give notice for yourself, suppose you were to go, as well as your husband. Leave little Charles to my care. Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove cannot think it wrong while I remain with him. Are you serious? Cried Mary, her eyes brightening. Dear me, that's a very good thought, very good, indeed. To be sure, I may just as well go as not, for I am of no use at home, am I? And it only harasses me. You, who have not a mother's feelings, are a great deal the properest person. You can make little Charles do anything, he always minds you at a word. It will be a great deal better than leaving him only with Jemima. Oh, I shall certainly go, I am sure I ought if I can, quite as much as Charles, for they want me excessively to be acquainted with Captain Wentworth, and I know you do not mind being left alone. An excellent thought of yours, indeed, Annie. I will go and tell Charles, and get ready directly. You can send for us, you know, at a moment's notice, if anything is the matter, but I dare say there will be nothing to alarm you. I should not go, you may be sure, if I did not feel quite at ease about my dear child. The next moment she was tapping at her husband's dressing room door, and as Annie followed her upstairs, she was in time for the whole conversation, which began with Mary saying, in a tone of great exultation, I mean to go with you, Charles, for first I'm of no more use at home than you are. If I were to shut myself up forever with the child, I should not be able to persuade him to do anything he did not like. Annie will stay, Annie undertakes to stay at home and take care of him. It is Anne's own proposal, and so I shall go with you, which will be a great deal better, for I have not dined at the other house since Tuesday. This is very kind of Annie, was her husband's answer, and TANTS. I should be very glad to have you go, but it seems rather hard that she should be left at home by herself, to nurse our sick child. Annie was now at hand to take up her own cause, and the sincerity of her manner being soon sufficient to convince him. Where
I I do wanted to watch the inauguration, the Biden inauguration that is happening, and I had did have one notification, and in the morning I was checking that at what time this inauguration was going to happen. I was pretty fascinated about it, but hopefully I'll watch it, watch the recording in the evening or sometimes else. So yes, so because I want to fix a schedule for the time that I am reading and the time I'm studying and all. In the evening, for for the streaming and all, I think I will do the schedule for 1 hour and all, 1 hour and 50 minutes and all. Yes, I think that the stream is already on, like for the Biden inauguration and all. And it was to start from 5:30, and I think that it's already pretty much going on. I'll watch the recording.
Annie was now at hand to take up her own cause, and the sincerity of her manner being soon sufficient to convince him, where conviction was at least very agreeable, he had no farther scruples as to her being left to dine alone, though he still wanted her to join them in the evening, when the child might be at rest for the night, and kindly urged her to let him come and fetch her. But she was quite unpersuadable, and this being the case, she had ere long the pleasure of seeing them set off together in high spirits. They were gone, she hoped, to be happy, however oddly constructed such happiness might seem. As for herself, she was left with as many sensations of comfort as would, perhaps, ever likely to be hers. She knew herself to be of the first utility to the child, and what was it to her if Frederick Wentworth were only half a mile distant, making himself agreeable to others? She would have liked to know how he felt as to a meeting. Perhaps indifferent, if indifference could exist under such circumstances. He must be either indifferent or unwilling. Had he wished ever to see her again, he need not have waited till this time. He would have done what she could not but believe that in his place she should have done long ago, when events had been early giving him the independence which alone had been wanting. Her brother and sister came back delighted with their new acquaintance.
Let me just share the stream um, on Facebook, I think so. Yeah, maybe I will not do it because the quality is not very good, I think. But uh, let's see.
Her brother and sister came back delighted with their new acquaintance and their visit in general. There had been music, singing, talking, laughing, all that was most agreeable, charming manners in Captain Wentworth, no shyness or reserve. They seemed all to know each other perfectly, and he was coming the very next morning to shoot with Charles. He was to come to breakfast, but not at the cottage, though that had been proposed at first, but then he had been pressed to come to the great house instead, and he seemed afraid of being in Mrs. Charles Musgrove's way, on account of the child, and therefore, somehow, they hardly knew how, it ended in Charles's being to meet him to breakfast at his father's. Annie understood it. He wished to avoid seeing her. He had inquired after her, she found, slightly, as might suit a former slight acquaintance, seeming to acknowledge such as she had acknowledged, actuated, perhaps, by the same view of escaping introduction when they were to meet. The morning hours of the cottage were always later than those of the other house, and on the morrow the difference was so great that Mary and Annie were not more than beginning breakfast when Charles came in to say that they were just setting off, that he was come for his dogs, that his sisters were following with Captain Wentworth, his sisters meaning to visit Mary and the child, and Captain Wentworth proposing also to wait on her for a few minutes if not inconvenient, and though Charles had answered for the child's being in no such state as TANTS could make it inconvenient, Captain Wentworth would not be satisfied without his running on to give notice. Mary, very much gratified by this attention, was delighted to receive him, while a thousand feelings rushed on Annie, of which this was the most consoling, that it would soon be over. And it was soon over. In 2 minutes after Charles's preparation, the others appeared, they were in the drawing room. Her eye half met Captain Wentworth's, a bow, a curtsy passed, she heard his voice, he talked to Mary, said all that was right, said something to the Miss Musgroves, enough to mark an easy footing, the room seemed full of persons and voices, but a few minutes ended it. Charles showed himself at the window, all was ready, their visitor had bowed and was gone, the Miss Musgroves were gone too, suddenly resolving to walk to the end of the village with the sportsman. The room was cleared, and Annie might finish her breakfast as she could. It is over. It is over. She repeated to herself again and again, in nervous gratitude. The worst is over. Mary talked, but she could not attend. She had seen him. They had met. They had been once more in the same room. Soon, however, she began to reason with herself, and tried to be feeling less. 8 years, almost 8 years had passed, since all had been given up. How absurd to be resuming the agitation which such an interval had banished into distance and indistinctness. What might not 8 years do? Events of every description, changes, alienations, removals, all must be comprised in it, and oblivion of the past, how natural, how certain too. It included nearly a third part of her own life. Alas, with all her reasoning, she found that to retentive feelings 8 years may be little more than nothing. Now, how were his sentiments to be read? Was this like wishing to avoid her? And the next moment she was hating herself for the folly which asked the question. On one other question which perhaps her utmost wisdom might not have prevented, she was soon spared all suspense, for, after the Miss Musgroves had returned and finished their visit at the cottage, she had this spontaneous information from Mary. Captain Wentworth is not very gallant by you, Annie, though he was so attentive to me. Henrietta asked him what he thought of you, when they went away, and he said, you were so altered he should not have known you again. Mary had no feelings to make her respect her sisters in a common way, but she was perfectly unsuspicious of being inflicting any peculiar wound. Altered beyond his knowledge, Annie fully submitted, in silent, deep mortification. Doubtless it was so, and she could take no revenge, for he was not altered, or not for the worse. She had already acknowledged it to herself, and she could not think differently, let him think of her as he would. No, the years which had destroyed her youth and bloom had only given him a more glowing, manly, open look, in no respect lessening. TANTS. His personal advantages. She had seen the same Frederick Wentworth. So altered that he should not have known her again. These were words which could not but dwell with her. Yet she soon began to rejoice that she had heard them. They were of sobering tendency, they allayed agitation, they compose, and consequently must make her happier. Frederick Wentworth had used such words, or something like them, but without an idea that they would be carried round to her. He had thought her wretchedly altered, and in the first moment of appeal, had spoken as he felt. He had not forgiven Annie Elliot. She had used him ill, deserted and disappointed him, and worse, she had shown a feebleness of character in doing so, which his own decided, confident temper could not endure. She had given him up to oblige others. It had been the effect of over-persuasion. It had been weakness and timidity. He had been most warmly attached to her, and had never seen a woman since whom he thought her equal, but, except from some natural sensation of curiosity, he had no desire of meeting her again. Her power with him was gone forever. It was now his object to marry. He was rich, and being turned on shore, fully intended to settle as soon as he could be properly tempted, actually looking round, ready to fall in love with all the speed which a clear head and a quick taste could allow. He had a heart for either of the Miss Musgroves, if they could catch it, a heart, in short, for any pleasing young woman who came in his way, excepting Annie Elliot. This was his only secret exception, when he said to his sister, in answer to her suppositions, "Yes, here I am, Sophia, quite ready to make a foolish match. Anybody between 15 and 30 may have me for asking. A little beauty, and a few smiles, and a few compliments to the navy, and I am a lost man. Should not this be enough for a sailor, who has had no society among women to make him nice?" He said it, she knew, to be contradicted. His bright proud eye spoke the conviction that he was nice, and Annie Elliot was not out of his thoughts, when he more seriously described the woman he should wish to meet with. A strong mind, with sweetness of manner, made the first and the last of the description. "That is the woman I want," said he. "Something a little inferior I shall of course put up with, but it must not be much. If I am a fool, I shall be a fool indeed, for I have thought on the subject more than most men." TANTS. Chapter 8. From this time Captain Wentworth and Annie Elliot were repeatedly in the same circle. They were soon dining in company together at Mr. Musgrove's, for the little boy's state could no longer supply his aunt with a pretence for absenting herself, and this was but the beginning of other dinnings and other meetings. Whether former feelings were to be renewed must be brought to the proof. Former times must undoubtedly be brought to the recollection of each. They could not but be reverted to. The year of their engagement could not but be named by him, in the little narratives or descriptions which conversation called forth. His profession qualified him, his disposition led him, to talk, and, that was in the year 6, that happened before I went to sea in the year 6, occurred in the course of the first evening they spent together, and though his voice did not falter, and though she had no reason to suppose his eye wandering towards her while he spoke, Annie felt the utter impossibility, from her knowledge of his mind, that he could be unvisited by remembrance any more than herself. There must be the same immediate association of thought, though she was very far from conceiving it to be of equal pain. They had no conversation together, no intercourse but what the commonest civility required. Once so much to each other, now nothing. There had been a time when of all the large party now filling the drawing room at Uppercross, they would have found it most difficult to cease to speak to one another. With the exception, perhaps, of Admiral and Mrs. Croft, who seemed particularly attached and happy, Annie could allow no other exceptions even among the married couples. There could have been no two hearts so open, no tastes so similar, no feelings so in unison, no countenances so beloved. Now they were as strangers, nay, worse than strangers, for they could never become acquainted. It was a perpetual estrangement. When he talked, she heard the same voice, and discerned the same mind. There was a very general ignorance of all naval matters throughout the party, and he was very much questioned, and especially by the two Miss Musgroves, who seemed hardly to have any eyes but for him, as to the manner of living on board, daily regulations, food, hours, and sea, and their surprise at his accounts, at learning the degree of accommodation and arrangement which was practicable, drew from him some pleas. TANTS. And ridicule, which reminded Annie of the early days when she too had been ignorant, and she too had been accused of supposing sailors to be living on board without anything to eat, or any cook to dress it if there were, or any servant to wait, or any knife and fork to use. From thus listening and thinking, she was roused by a whisper of Mrs. Musgrove's who, overcome by fond regrets, could not help saying, "Ah, Miss Annie, if it had pleased heaven to spare my poor son, I dare say he would have been just such another by this time." Annie suppressed a smile, and listened kindly, while Mrs. Musgrove relieved her heart a little more, and for a few minutes, therefore, could not keep pace with the conversation of the others. When she could let her attention take its natural course again, She found the Miss Musgroves just fetching the Navy list, their own Navy list, the first that had ever been at Epicross, and sitting down together to pore over it, with the professed view of finding out the ships that Captain Wentworth had commanded. Your first was the Asp, I remember. We will look for the Asp. You will not find her there. Quite worn out and broken up. I was the last man who commanded her. Hardly fit for service then. Reported fit for home service for a year or two, and so I was sent off to the West Indies. The girls looked all amazement. The Admiralty, he continued, entertained themselves now and then, with sending a few hundred men to sea, in a ship not fit to be employed. But they have a great many to provide for, and among the thousands that may just as well go to the bottom as not, it is impossible for them to distinguish the very set who may be least missed. Foo, foo, cried the Admiral, what stuff these young fellows talk. Never was a better sloop than the Asp in her day. For an old-built sloop, you would not see her equal. Lucky fellow to get her. He knows there must have been 20 better men than himself applying for her at the same time. Lucky fellow.
Since I don't need that much of space in the frame portion, so I'm gonna reduce it a bit. That is enough. And yes. Okay, now chat box. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. Now the overall book is also visible, so we will get back on with our reading.
Lucky fellow to get anything so soon, with no more interest than his. I felt my luck, Admiral, I assure you, replied Captain Wentworth, seriously. I was as well satisfied with my appointment as you can desire. It was a great object with me at that time to be at sea, a very great object. I wanted to be doing something. To be sure you did. What should a young fellow like you do ashore for half a year together? If a man had not a wife, he soon wants to be afloat again. But, Captain Wentworth, cried Louisa, how vexed you must have been when you came to the Asp, to see what an old thing they had given you. Tants. I knew pretty well what she was before that day, said he, smiling. I had no more discoveries to make than you would have as to the fashion and strength of any old pelisse, which you had seen lent about among half your acquaintance ever since you could remember, and which at last, on some very wet day, is lent to yourself. Ah, she was a dear old Asp to me. She did all that I wanted. I knew she would. I knew that we should either go to the bottom together, or that she would be the making of me, and I never had 2 days of foul weather all the time I was at sea in her, and after taking privateers enough to be very entertaining, I had the good luck in my passage home the next autumn, to fall in with the very French frigate I wanted. I brought her into Plymouth Sound, when a gale came on, which lasted 4 days and nights, and which would have done for poor old Asp in half the time, our touch with the great nation not having much improved our condition. 24 hours later, and I should only have been a gallant Captain Wentworth, in a small paragraph at one corner of the newspapers, and being lost in only a sloop, nobody would have thought about me. Anne's shudderings were to herself alone, but the Miss Musgroves could be as open as they were sincere, in their exclamations of pity and horror. And so then, I suppose, said Mrs. Musgrove, in a low voice, as if thinking aloud, so then he went away to the Laconia, and there he met with our poor boy. Charles, my dear, beckoning him to her to ask Captain Wentworth where it was he first met with your poor brother. I always forgot. It was at Gibraltar, mother, I know. Dick had been left ill at Gibraltar, with a recommendation from his former captain to Captain Wentworth. Oh. But, Charles, tell Captain Wentworth he need not be afraid of mentioning poor Dick before me, for it would be rather a pleasure to hear him talked of by such a good friend. Charles, being somewhat more mindful of the probabilities of the case, the girls were now hunting for the Laconia, and Captain Wentworth could not deny himself the pleasure of taking the precious volume into his own hands to save them the trouble, and once more read aloud the little statement of her name and rate, and present non-commissioned class, observing over it that she too had been one of the best friends man ever had. Ah, those were pleasant days when
that is it for this first stream of reading. This was more like a testing shot of stream, not a particular one. But I hope it went well, and we did. I think that around more than half an hour of stream, half an hour, 40 minutes of stream that we did. And next onwards, I think that I'll stream some gaming after this, hopefully. And that will be it for today. And I will see you guys after 1 or 2 hours, I think so. I'll get back to some studies. Then after a session, I'll come back and stream some games for couple of hours, like 1 hour or half an hour, one or 1.5 hour, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so that is it. Thank you for watching and thank you for reading along with me. uh, this particular book is still a bit difficult to understand, I know. I'm reading the Count of Monte Cristo along with this one as well, which is also going well, and I hope it's about 26 to 27 hours in that book are also remaining. So hopefully I'll be able to cover it up in the next 2 weeks. If not, then I would have to increase the pace of my reading, because lately I have not been focusing on my reading part a lot due to my exams and studies and all. So yes, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys. I think that in after 8:30, I guess, or at 9 o'clock. I'll see you guys again. Bye bye.